Hello, my name's Polly Ritchie. I'm an occupational therapist from Brisbane, Australia, and I am also lucky enough to have a son with Down syndrome. So I've worked with the National Health Service in the UK before, working with people with Down syndrome, and also over here I've worked with the Cerebral Palsy League and also worked with lots of people with Down syndrome and intellectual disability. So today I'm going to speak to you about hypotonia and how it affects the daily life across the lifespan. So outline for this session, we're just going to talk about what hypotonia is, what daily living skills are, because as occupational therapists, that's what we are focused on, and occupational performance, which we'll touch on in a moment. And then we're going to use a few examples of people with Down syndrome across the lifespan, and also look at some strategies to improve these particular daily living skills in relation to occupational performance. So what is hypotonia? So it's often described as sort of low muscle tone or weak muscle tone. So often people will, pediatricians, when children are diagnosed, when they're first born mostly, they kind of describe them as quite floppy. And that's just the messages from the brain are just taking a little bit longer to send to the muscles. So yeah. There's a lack of muscle definition, as you can see in the picture here. Often the ligaments are a little bit more lax as well. So the ligament, which is obviously joins bone to bone, tend to be a little bit stretchier than people without low muscle tone. And the muscles tend to relax more easily. So this is something that's lifelong, but also can improve over time. And it's not to be confused with a lack of strength. So if you have a child with Down syndrome, or if you've worked with people with Down syndrome before, you will know that they can be very, very strong people. So so don't confuse low muscle tone with lack of strength. It can be relatively variable from person to person. So we'll continue on. Right, so what are daily living skills? So as occupational therapists, we tend to break things down into self-care, leisure, and productivity. So self-care are all those things you kind of need to do. So eating, dressing, grooming, personal hygiene tasks, toileting, bathing, showering, sleeping, and having some rest. Then we move on to leisure activities, which are things like play, sports, or hobbies that are anything that you could consider is not particularly essential. And then we've got productivity, which is either school for most children or works, and that can be paid or volunteer work. So occupational performance is all about how well people manage in the areas of the person. So you as a person, the environment, so the places they need to go, and the occupation, so the things they need to do in their life. So and all those things interact to determine their ability to perform optimally in their occupations. And that's how we tend to look at things as occupational therapists. So we'll look at John here. So John is a very cheeky little 2-year-old. He loves social interaction. As you can see here, he's when he's sitting, he needs to have his hands propped there. But he's just a lovely, lovely little boy. And his main occupations as a 2-year-old are feeding and eating, playing and sleeping. And his main environments are home, and he also attends preschool at a special school. Okay, so how does hypotonia affect John's daily life? So often, which I forgot to say earlier, hypotonia can affect the whole body. Often does affect the whole body. And so this means that John actually has delayed speech. So that can be a mix of cognitive and muscle tone. So just the muscles in the jaw tend to be a little bit more lax. So just creating those sounds tend to be a bit more tricky. It also can impact on things like eating and also fine motor skills. So things like holding a spoon, which you would probably expect some 2-year-olds to be doing, is feeding themselves with a spoon. John finds it quite tricky to hold a spoon at the moment. So in terms of his leisure activities, so when he's sitting and standing and walking without assistance impact on his ability to participate in leisure activities. And the same with his productivity, so going to preschool. So those particular aspects of the hypotonia affect his sitting, standing, and walking without assistance. So that affects his ability to get around preschool. So so from there we kind of look at, so what are the main issues here? So difficulty maintaining stability when standing, difficulty with feeding himself at meal times, and also requires significant assistance to participate in games at preschool. So just needs a bit of help. That's okay. So how do we help John improve his occupational performance? So what we do when you're 2 years old is you find fun activities that John really likes to do. So that will improve his muscle memory and also get the muscles working quite well there. So things like swimming are really good, and hydrotherapy, so getting in the pool, obviously with assistance and supervision from an adult. So it really improves those gross motor skills because using the resistance in the water. And you'll often find taking away the gravity element that we have on land allows John to be a lot more free in the water. So you might find he's able to walk a bit more easily, which will help improve that stability as well and get the muscles a bit more used to, standing a bit more upright and not slouching as much. Also things like going to the playground and climbing, again, under supervision, make sure everything's nice and safe, will help improve his stability and also improve that muscle memory just through practice and opportunity. So, and things like adapted cutlery, so with the feeding himself, having something with a larger handle that's easier to grip, so he's not having to grasp so hard, and that there'll probably be a lot more motivation to grab a spoon that way. Okay, so move on to school age here. We've got Mr. Elliot. So Elliot is 6 years old. I'm just going to show you a little video while I'm talking about Elliot. This is Elliot doing some handwriting here. So you can see sort of the lack of muscle definition in little hands and arms there. And Elliot's sort of leaning on the table a bit, and he's got quite a bigger marker there. Elliot is a very cheeky little fella. He really loves eating. He loves playing, going to the playground, jumping. He really, he does. One of his occupations is also learning, going to school. Another one of his occupations, obviously, are things like developing those independent skills, so dressing and toileting. And his main environments are home, school, and the community. So how does hypotonia affect Elliot's occupational performance? So in the area of self-care, for Elliot, it's about developing independent skills. So Elliot does have a bit of delayed speech as well, just due to, all the muscles going on in the little bit of hypotonia going on in around the jaw. His fine motor skills need a little bit of work. So as you can see there with his writing, he finds it a lot more tricky to hold the pen as well. So having something that's a little bit larger. Things like opening packets, pulling up his pants for toileting, those sorts of things are quite tricky for him. So he does attend mainstream school as well. So those sorts of things like pulling his pants up for toileting, it would be really good to get him doing that properly, which would be wonderful. So in terms of leisure and playing, so Elliot can run and he can jump, but just getting that, the hypotonia obviously affects sort of strength and speed for running and jumping. And so he doesn't really jump as high as some of his peers who perhaps do not have Down syndrome. And also he can get very tired very easily. So I often find, by the end of the day, Elliot is very, very tired. So, and also with some activities, like if they were doing longer running or walking, he'll most likely want someone to carry him a little bit later on. So developing that endurance is also quite important. And so when he's at school, so sitting on the mat for long periods of time, he finds that a bit of a challenge. So we'll often sort of lie down or like prop himself up a lot. And because it's quite a challenge to sit in one spot with hypotonia, because it does require a lot of recruitment of your muscles to do a good job for a period of time. Often kids with Down syndrome will perhaps want to move around a lot more because it's a lot easier. And also Elliot does kind of lie on his desk, as you could see before with the writing task. So his main occupation issue and performance issues, which is what we just talked about, were sitting still on the mat at mat time, sitting to concentrate on learning tasks, so he'd get up and move around quite a lot, communication and holding a pen and pencil for writing tasks for a period of time is a bit tricky, pulling his trousers up off the toilet things. Those are his occupational performance issues. So how can we help with these? So using a supportive seat when he's on the mat, so things like a howdah hug chair, which is here, these little bamboo chairs, just allows you to sort of push back a little bit and still maintain that stability. Having a posturally supportive chair when working at a desk would be quite handy for Elliot when he's sitting doing some writing tasks. Having a slope board for writing to reduce the lean on the table would be quite good as well. And also having a bit of a finger gym program, so just warming up the muscles, doing different strength exercises for the finger muscles is always very good. And also perhaps having some larger pens or pencils, as you could see before in the writing task, so that he's not, even though he was still gripping reasonably hard, it's not, all the energy is not really focusing on gripping so much all the time. So when you've got something that's a bit fatter, you don't need to apply as much force. So that is usually quite handy, which means you have less demand on the muscles. And also he uses an iPad with a speech application on it, and that was put in there by his speech pathologist. And if anybody does need any, use their iPad for communication, which is quite popular these days, it would be good to speak to a speech pathologist for that, because they are quite an expert in those areas. So also having a visual schedule to provide a time frame on activities would be quite good as well. So ensuring that Elliot knows that he's doing a writing task for a period of time, and then after that he's able to get up and move around, and just having a bit more of a visual idea of what he's doing often works for kids with Down syndrome as well. Okay, so just move straight on to adulthood here, because in the school sort of area, I mean, it's not a lot changes. It's really about providing opportunity for a lot of movement and learning, and I suppose a lot of kind of repetitive movement when you're looking at hypotonia. So I moved on to Martha, just to demonstrate how things go when you get a little bit older with hypotonia. So Martha is 26 years old. She is really lovely, and she really loves Harry Potter and really enjoys dancing. She is a competitive swimmer and has been involved in swimming for quite a long time during her life. So she was introduced to it when she was quite young. She's quite independent in all of her self-care tasks now, which is great. But she does require supervision for productivity and leisure activities. So in terms of Martha as a person, she is 26 years old. She's female. She's really lovely. And then in terms of her environment, she attends some volunteer work. Then she also goes to a day program where she learns to do things like cooking and do some nice socializing and make some good friends. She also has quite structured dancing and also attends squad swimming. So there's some structured activities in there, which is great. And then so in the areas of self-care, leisure and productivity, we've just included all of those really, because as an adult, and she's quite independent in a lot of these areas, then listing them all would just take up forever. So we'll just move on. So how does hypotonia affect Martha's occupational performance? Well, actually, it's kind of quite nice, because Martha, because she's been involved in sport for quite a long time, when we get to things like leisure and productivity, so there's things that really need sort of more gross motor movement and endurance, they're not really affected too much at all. So the main things that her hypotonia affects are her very fine motor skills, and then some of her speech is unclear, but it's not to the point where it's you can very much understand Martha's speech, but there's just a few bits when she's speaking that are a little bit mumbled. So she does still see a speech therapist for that. So her occupational performance issues, she just mainly requires supervision with complex tasks such as cooking, planning and finances, and those aren't actually related to hypotonia, which is fantastic. It's more of a cognitive more cognitive aspect of things. So hypotonia is obviously not affecting the majority of daily living tasks, except for those very fine motor tasks, like I said before. So things like cracking eggs and opening slippery packets and doing things like that are a bit more tricky. So how can we help Martha with that? So supporting her with her very fine motor tasks is quite important. So perhaps opening packets for her is quite good. Also providing Martha with appropriate support for those sort of more complex tasks like managing finances and doing any sort of planning, encouraging her to keep participating in her swimming and her dancing. And also as she gets older, like older, continue doing walks and things like hydrotherapy and Tai Chi and things like yoga that still encourage that, that muscle movement and requires the brain to continue working, and also is quite gentle on the body, which is, quite important for all of us, not just people with Down syndrome. So in conclusion, hypotonia affects people with Down syndrome right across their lifespan. So mainly it impacts gross and fine motor skills and speech. So it can impact on the ability to perform some daily living skills and develop independence, but tends to be earlier on in life. So providing opportunity for developing those sorts of skills in gross motor and fine motor, and also making sure speech therapy is involved is very good. And also, yes, can be improved through getting into sports and therapies. Also, another thing I forgot to mention is something like when your child gets to a point where they can concentrate quite well, doing things like sort of karate and the martial arts type things are quite good, because it really requires a lot of concentration on that body movement and where things are going, and being reasonably accurate. So, and also patience. So that's if you can get to that point, that would be wonderful. So hypotonia is lifelong, and also as I said before, lots of everyday activities can be done to improve hypotonia. So just getting out and doing sports and being in the playground, going for walks, sort of challenging the body, which is good for all of us. And it's important to provide an opportunity in everyday life as well as therapy sessions. So if you can not rely on just therapy sessions alone, but try, do things as a family and go out and do some fun stuff. If you can, that would be wonderful. And important to continue movement throughout the lifespan. So as I saw with Martha there, she's only 26 years old, but as we know, people with Down syndrome, or anybody who stops movement, it's sort of if you move it, you lose it kind of thing. So it's really important for all of us, without, just to keep, active. So good for that joint mobility, but especially our guys with Down syndrome and hypotonia. It's just really important to keep things moving and to keep nice and healthy. So that's pretty much it for me. So thank you, everybody. Those are my contact details there if you need to contact me for any reason, or if you have any questions. And thank you very much for listening.